Financial watchdogs around the world have been grappling with how to regulate the growing number of digital cryptocurrencies and tokens, the prices of which have fallen from historic highs reached in November last year. And now South Africa says cryptocurrency financial companies will need to apply for a license between June the 1st and November 20, 2023 in order to operate legally. According to the UNCTAD, more than 7% of South Africans are using digital currencies. In 2020, about 15% of South Africa's population invested in Bitcoin. But that report also warns that widespread use of unregulated digital currencies poses danger to the continent's financial system. And South Africa in particular, has already seen the demise of Mirror Trading International last year, with losses totaling about $1.2 billion. And also in June 2021, the founders of crypto startup AfriCrypt vanished after running a $3.6 billion crypto scam. This is a massive industry, but one that continues to cause controversy, and now regulation is what looks like is next. Joining me from London is Dr. Salami. She's the co-director of the Center for FinTech at the University of East London. That 3.6 billion is still running through my head. Dr. Salami, welcome again to Business Edge. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a delight to be here once again.
All right. So I'm stuck on this 3.6 billion that I just read out in terms of what was the scam of AfriCrypt. You also had about 1.2 billion that was also part of the losses for Mirror Trading International last year. So for many people, we've had this conversation about regulation of the crypto space. Why does it seem for South Africa it's the next logical step?
The regulation of crypto assets, people have realized, or the countries have realized, is quite critical. As you mentioned, there have been different types of scams. There have been risks to retail investors, the types that regulators really are interested or keen to regulate. And therefore, there's a need for regulation. And in the case of South Africa has actually announced that crypto assets are now going to be deemed as financial products. And the reason why that's critical is because for the first time, crypto assets in South Africa have actually been brought under the purview, if you like, of regulation. Prior to now, they hadn't had any status as an asset, financial asset, or a commodity, which basically meant that people that transacted in them, i.e. investors, for example, that invested in or the financial regulator, the financial services conduct regulator. So this definitely is quite critical and a positive move to be able to protect investors in this way, only because we now know that the regulator can actually, on the basis of the regulation, i.e. sort of looking at the way they're issued, looking at the platforms that actually facilitate their trading and exchanging, and also looking at the platforms that are responsible for custody, bringing all these under the remit of regulation,
yes,
makes it possible to actually protect investors more.
Okay, so there's something I want us to take note of, and I believe terminology is very important here. So the Financial Sector Conduct Authority has named crypto assets and not cryptocurrencies in its publication for the Gazette. Why is that an important distinction to take note of?
Okay, now this is a very important distinction to take note of, and I have to say that from the history of crypto assets or cryptocurrencies, if you like, if I'm permitted to use that, right from the time of the launch of Bitcoin way back in 2009, there'd always been this dialogue as to whether cryptocurrencies, if we call them cryptocurrencies, they actually operate as currencies. And of course, we know that for a currency or for something to be referred to as a currency, it has to be known as having three characteristics, i.e. the characteristic that it can be used as a medium of exchange, it can be used as a unit of account, and it can be used as a store of value. As if we track the history of Bitcoin and all these subsequent altcoins or currencies that have come after it, if you like, they haven't been able to successfully fulfill those three requirements. And therefore, technically, describing them as currencies technically isn't correct. If we look at the way they have been operating beyond, I'd say, the launch of Bitcoin and also as we see various other sort of coins come up, they've lent themselves more to functioning as assets, financial assets that retail investors, for example, and investors now, even including institutional investors, want to invest in. And as a result of that, it's much more pertinent, if I'd say, or much more relevant to call them assets rather than currencies, because they fit that description more.
Okay. So the whole point of cryptocurrencies, as we've seen in recent times, is they're anonymous and there's blockchain, there's an inability to track and all of that. But the report also notes that by recognizing crypto as financial products, it will make it easier for South Africa to monitor it from a money laundering and terror financing prospect. And again, as I said, the whole background is that cryptocurrencies can make you anonymous, and it's a decentralized sort of platform or system that they operate in. So do you think South Africa's regulation and licensing can change this, can take away sort of that anonymous feel, so there is that tracking in place? And of course, the fact that there's a potential for you to know who's behind what transaction, what the transaction is made of, and where it's going. Can this legislation and this move by South Africa bring about that change?
So that's a very good question again. So there are two issues here. So crypto assets can be transacted on really two main types of forums or platforms. They can be transacted or utilized in a centralized mechanism, such as, for example, or through a centralized mechanism, such as, for example, where we have what are virtual asset service or crypto asset service providers, such as cryptocurrency exchanges. Now, these can be subject to regulation, and these are the types that the South African regulation and act here seeks to control. Because basically what that means is those platforms and those exchanges would need to fulfill things like, they first of all need a license to operate. They'd be subject to regulation around the way they conduct their business. So things around ensuring that we don't have, things facilitating what is inappropriate behavior that then places retail investors in jeopardy, if you like. And then also things like the custody of those
Dr. Salami.
Or those platforms that are centralized really can be subject to regulation. However, there's also another mechanism. So you have decentralized platforms, which are the ones that are quite problematic, and which are the ones that you refer to as being, not really subject to regulation, because these are purely facilitating financial activities on purely the blockchain. And these are decentralized, which basically means that it's difficult to actually hold a certain organization, if you like, responsible. Now, these are the ones that are trickier to regulate, and these are the ones that really aren't for now subject to any form of regulation.
Okay, so Dr. Salami, very briefly, my final question, because this is a way we see that across the world, countries and economies and regulators are trying to figure out how to deal with the cryptocurrency system and the space that it's in. But the Reserve Bank of South Africa has been very open about wanting to regulate crypto assets. And one of the things that they said is that they believe it poses a danger to monetary policy. So let me put this to you, a very quick answer, please. How much danger do you think cryptocurrencies pose to monetary policy across the continent? As I said earlier, the UNCTAD has also said that they could pose a danger to the continent's financial system. Do you agree with that?
So the more widespread cryptocurrencies become, the more they could pose a danger to monetary policy. And of course, we know that monetary policies it's a set of policies that monetary authorities such as central banks use to actually steer their economy to a path of growth and stability. And one of the tools that they would use to do this is through interest rates. And because the critical tool used to conduct monetary policy is the domestic currency, it basically means that if any other type of currency competes with the domestic currency, i.e. the fiat currency, it becomes extremely difficult now for the central bank to have a tool to steer the economy on a path of growth and stability as and when is required. So yes, there's that threat there, and hence the interest that monetary authorities such as central banks have to ensure that this space is actually regulated.
Okay, Dr. Salami, you know, as I told you last time, we cannot exhaust the conversations around cryptocurrencies and the future of the financial system. This is just one of those. And we probably anticipate that more African economies will step into this regulation space when it comes to cryptocurrencies. So I know we'll be talking to you again sometime soon. Thank you so much, Dr. Iwa Salami.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me.
All right. And it's a conversation to watch. Cryptocurrencies have, in a way, made things much more liberalized, but there are many concerns for the safety of investors' money, particularly retail investors as it may be. So let's continue to watch this develop, and we'll see how things develop in South Africa.